is an intranasal vaccine. Properly restraining the animal's head and neck is key to successful administration. For larger cattle, it is important that the animal is first properly restrained in a head gate or chute. Use the cannula or pump-it device to give the animal 2 milliliters of Enforce 3 in a single nostril. Be sure to use a new cannula for each animal to prevent the spread of pathogens. Make sure to grasp the cannula only by the collar when removing. On the pump-it device, use a clean paper towel to wipe the tip clean between calves. Young calves may be too small for a typical head gate in the chute. In this case, you may need to restrain the calf by hand or on the ground and administer the vaccination with a small syringe and cannula. Make sure not to extend the calf's head and neck upward, as this opens the windpipe, increasing the chance of fluid going into the calf's lungs. Always consult with your veterinarian if you have questions on proper administration of vaccines. And that's how you would.
So there you can see how they're injecting through the nose the sterile diluent into the cattle that administers the vaccine. And now let's see what they're sticking up the noses of everyone for these stupid tests.
This video describes collection for detection of COVID-19. There are no specific contraindications for collecting specimens with nasopharyngeal swabs. However, clinicians should be cautious if the patient has had recent nasal trauma or surgery, has a history of a markedly deviated nasal septum, chronically blocked nasal passages, or severe coagulopathy. Nasopharyngeal swabs are specifically manufactured to have long, flexible shafts made of plastic or metal and tips made of Dacron, rayon, or flocked nylon. It is essential to put on personal protective equipment, or PPE, correctly, and to follow the pertinent respiratory and contact precautions according to both the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, and by your institution. If possible, you should put on and take off PPE in the presence of an observer to make sure that there are no breaks in technique that may pose a risk of contamination. First, put on a protective gown and wash your hands with soap and water, or use an alcohol-based solution. And put on a pair of non-sterile gloves, followed by a protective mask with a rating of N95 or higher, as recommended by the CDC. Finally, put on a face shield for eye protection.
Now, all of this is just to administer the test? Why? What's in the test?
Masks are recommended for all patients suspected of having COVID-19. Have the patient take off her mask and blow her nose into a tissue to clear excess secretions from the nasal passages. Remove the swab from the packaging. Tilt the patient's head back slightly so that the nasal passages become more accessible. Ask the patient to close her eyes to lessen the mild discomfort.
And what'd she do with the tissue just in her hands?
Insert the swab along the nasal septum,
just above the floor of the nasal passage, to the nasopharynx, until resistance is felt. If you find resistance to the passage of the swab, back off and try reinserting it at a different angle, closer to the floor
of the nasal canal. Insert the swab into the nostril parallel to the palate.
Look at how far this is going in just to get a test. When the virus supposedly dribbling out of your nose or from your hands or from a countertop can get it, why do they have to stick it so far in, folks, unless there's something else going on?
Removing it. Ask the patient to reapply her mask. Open the collection tube and insert the swab into the tube. Break the swab at the groove. Discard what remains of the swab. Close the labeled collection tube and place it in a biohazard bag.
It may also be returned to its original packaging.
Did you notice how they broke off just the end and set it in? So that's the activating agent at the end of it, folks. Now take a look at what happens next is he's having to put on this extensive PPE protection gear and whatnot because of just the testing, of touching the testing, that they may have had the virus that they contacted it.
Follow the CDC directions for direct processing
of the swab specimen or placement of the swab in media with or without refrigeration. Remove your personal protective equipment as shown here or in accordance with the standards at your institution. First, remove your gown and gloves. Then clean your hands with an alcohol-based solution
or soap and water.
And just throwing it in the garbage
Put on a
can.
new pair of gloves and then remove your face shield and dispose of
And
it. Or
he's throwing it
in accordance
away.
with the guidelines at your institution.
So if the virus is
Wash your
in the
hands
garbage,
and put on another pair of gloves. Then remove your mask and follow your institutional guidelines for disposal.
so that means the contamination is going into our garbage?
Finally, remove the last pair of gloves and wash your hands.
Unbelievable.
This video has demonstrated how to collect specimens from the surface of the respiratory mucosa with nasopharyngeal swabs in order to diagnose COVID-19 in adults and in children. As shown, it is important to use approved PPE and the appropriate technique to minimize the possibility of spreading the virus.
You know, and how much proof do you need that they're contaminated, the coronavirus is actually in the testing? Here it says the tests are contaminated with the virus. Not seeing that on Fox and CNN and the Trump dumpster talking about that, are we? No, because they don't want you to know that the actual testing contains the deadly virus, the deadly vaccine, the deadly making you sick and sicker and controlling all of you with the hydrogel. And this is from the U.S. National Laboratory of Medicine, the National Institute of Health, NCBI. This is April 2019 published, Mucosal Nose Vaccines and Technologies. There's an urgent and unmet need to develop effective vaccines to reduce the, quote, global burden of infectious disease in animals and humans, and in particular for the majority of pathogens that affect via mucosal sites. Here we surmise the impediments to developing mucosal vaccines and review the new and emerging technologies aimed at overcoming the lack of effective vaccine delivery systems that is the major obstacle to developing new mucosal vaccines. Well, I guess they figured it out. They figured it out. Remember, they were giving back sugar cubes back in 1960s for the alleged polio virus, which was really DDT. And according to the National Institute of Health, it killed 98 million people from the sugar cube vaccines. Wake up, folks. Vaccines to combat zoonoses are particularly urgent. Combat, military. What's Trump doing? He's bringing up the military to administer these vaccines. But it's the tests, folks, we got to worry about. They're putting the vaccines, these deadly vaccines, and making us sick and sicker and control all humanity with the testing. Don't get the test. Hope this helps. Thank you, Pristine, for sharing this with me. I really appreciate it. Peace. Tag. Tell others. Wake up. Thanks.